Hello, my name's Tom Singer, and this is Concert Cues. My guest today, I'm delighted to say, is Dr. Stephen Hart, who I've had the honor of being part of his choirs for almost 2 decades now.
Wow.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that almost every time I go to a rehearsal, I come out having learned something, which I think is remarkable and wonderful. Of course, Dr. Hart, is who I call Steve, is also the director of the Billings Symphony Chorale, and we're going to talk about the concert that's this Saturday and Sunday, which is called Balance. And let's start with that. That's an interesting term. Why balance?
It came out of a line of a piece of music that I thought was just fabulous for the group. In the middle of our lives, it's as complicated as everyone else's, struggling for balance, balancing time. And that just got the creative juices flowing, and then everything started to just kind of tumble outward from that point.
Well, and you've put in the middle of the concert.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to start the concert with a piece where there's basically 2 choirs, the men and the women, singing. There's a word for that which I've forgotten.
Antiphonal.
That's the word I was looking for. And then we're going to have a chamber orchestra playing with 2 pieces. So tell us what's going on there.
All right. The first part of that is also kind of born out of the pandemic. So I heard Anton Armstrong's address to the American Choir Directors Association talking about composers of color, historically marginalized groups, and how do we represent that constituency well in our choirs. Thought, okay, so how do I apply this here in Billings, Montana? And I knew that piece had to be in there, that
Let All Nations?
In the middle.
In the middle, I got it.
And then when you start thinking about, okay, so what do we do now then? How do you select repertoire that's appropriate for this day and age that we live in? So to be true to the canon of Western choral art tradition, Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms, but how do you balance that against contemporary composers? So that was the basic question that all the repertoire then started with. So how do you balance this? So I was looking for women composers, composers of color, to balance off with the classic white Eurocentric tradition that is so commonplace. So
until you said that, I had no idea that I hadn't thought about who had composed these pieces. It's interesting that was a driving force in your selection.
It is. I would like to do more people from marginalized historically marginalized communities. But we do have a couple of female composers, a female composer that happens to be African American. So balancing those issues here in Billings, Montana. Okay. The pandemic was also a big part of that choice for the first piece of music that you alluded to, the antiphonal one, because we'd been gone from singing for so long in the same room with each other because we couldn't. It was locked down, so we were all huddled up in our own bubbles or in our own little spaces with just interacting virtually. So we did some of those things for the Billings Symphony Chorale, where I just essentially gave a couple of lectures about how this...
Well, and that's one of the things, being with you, I've learned an awful lot about vocal production that I had no idea about, and that was part of what you did during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting.
So that when we get back together, it's going to feel so good to just sing a chord with other human beings, plural. So that opening piece that just starts out with this great big 4-part chord stack and all the treble voices, great big chord stack and all the bass, tenor. So it's just so fun to sing that back and forth. We start off with a Renaissance piece that just fills up St. Pat's with these beautiful chords bouncing back and forth.
Yeah. And St. Pat's is a really interesting place for that kind of music.
Yeah, the acoustic's wonderful. It supports that style of singing really nicely.
Yeah, as long as everybody's counting and watching you.
Well, yeah, there is that. So moving forward then, if we have a chord stack, what would logically be, so every piece on the concert has an opposition or a balanced off position relative to the piece that came before. So big 4-part chord stack. The next piece of music is the Kyrie out of the Bach B minor Mass, which is linearly constructed as opposed to vertically constructed like the previous piece. Incredibly complex, extremely difficult, as you well know from trying to get some mastery over this beast.
Yes. Having sung it more than once, actually.
Yeah, all right. Hopefully the second time's a little better.
Exactly.
It's heavy, it's weighty, it is, Lord have mercy. If there's anything that the pandemic has taught us is that we need some of that in our lives. So directly after that, we switch gears again to a piece of Mozart that is just full of charm and short phrases. Pleasing variety is the overriding ideal of the time, and that's of course embedded into the Mozart that we're singing.
Which is a blast to sing.
Isn't it fun?
Yeah, it is. It's delightful.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's a great ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the instruments then balance with the voices, the full choir is balanced off with some soloists, so there's balance embedded in that particular piece of music.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's essentially the first half of the concert is the classic choral art tradition. Turning the page, so the second half then starts with that piece called In the Middle. Hopefully these pieces have, because we live with them for a while, the chorale started on these in, I think, August or September.
Right.
The Rocky students that are joining us have been dealing with it since after their October concert, so it's, almost 2 months that they've been having to deal with these ideas. So part of the goal here is to give the singers some food for thought and how to absorb these ideas and ideals into their own daily lives. So when you brought in the mantle clock, for example, I thought, there we go, so it's gotten under your skin a little bit.
Yeah.
The mantle clock that was my grandfather's has stopped at 9:20. We haven't had time to get it repaired. Is the poetry out of that piece.
Yes, and there's a whole lot of really neat poetry in that piece.
It's superb.
Yeah.
The composer kind of went after the running out of time component of it at the end. Mm-hmm. One of the students at Rocky had noted that, if you look at the poem, it's not necessarily about running out of time. It's about how do we use time well, like that spot that we worked on last night, with sometimes we take off our watches, sometimes we lie in the hammock and get caught in the rope in the net of stars. So great imagery about the hammock that surrounds us and the hammock of stars that's above.
And I want to take a diversion for just a little bit here, because one of the things that you focus on a lot with the chorale is the poetry in the music and conveying that meaning to the audience. And but you also have this amazingly technical side, like you were talking about the lectures with the vocal production. And there's a balance there too, right?
As a raging liberal arts educator, these are important concepts to me as a chemistry major and a music major at the same time. And then my launch into biochemistry, into neurosciences, and how this whole structure works and things. So it's important that we balance our science with our art. So I'm a big fan of Leonardo da Vinci, of course.
Yeah.
That's why we get the term Renaissance man. To how do we balance those things well? If you're just all one-sided, the breakthroughs don't happen.
That's right. The creativity comes because you've got lots of ideas bouncing around in your head.
Sure. That cross-pollinization of different pools of understanding and reasoning, different ways to interact with the world is truly important for breakthroughs.
Yeah. I was part of the committee that hired you as the symphony chorale, and and I don't have a copy of your resume anymore, but I remember having things like neuro-linguistic programming and mime.
Yes.
There was a fascinating list of things that you have studied to try to bring to this expertise to your doctorate and so on, right?
Sure, because as a conductor, you're silent.
Right. You turn your back on the audience.
Yeah. So the real work is embodying the capabilities of the performers in front of you to bring out their best while essentially miming either the meaning of the words, what's happening in the music, or the technique that we were talking about, the technique that they need in order to accomplish those goals. So you're dealing with three different pools of understanding as the conductor to help people bring forth that beauty.
Yeah. Do you think that that's different in a chorus than directing an orchestra, since you're doing a little of both in this concert?
Philosophically, no, it's the same. How it manifests is going to be different because the instrument is different. So violinists need something different for how to bring the bow to the string for their kind of attack, versus wind players that need kind of a broader gesture to encourage breath flow and spaciousness and so forth. And singers will need some of that, and sometimes singers need
articulation.
Articulation, yeah. Some reminders of, oh yes, we have to form these things that will help people understand our words.
Right. So then, and just another little diversion, we'll get back to the program in a second, but your mention of, I didn't know you had the biochemistry background. Your background actually involves a lot of music. Your parents were both choral directors, and I think you've got a brother who's one as well?
Yep. We call it the family business. So early on, we would go to these national conferences, and wherever we were in the country, we'd all go to, if it happened to be in San Antonio or something, and the family would get back together to go to these conventions and go to the concerts and discuss repertoire that everybody needed, and
right.
Go to dinner together.
Sharing information. And you told me last night, I hadn't heard of this either, your mother asked you to do a chore when you were 4 years old?
Oh, yes. So auto harps were the thing of the past, that you press a button and it changes these things, and if you strum it, it'll get a chord. Yeah. Well, my job as a kid was I had to tune a bunch of these auto harps so that Mom could actually walk into the classroom the next day. So I had this raft of auto harps that I needed to tune or help her tune. She'd do some of them, and I had to do the rest of them.
So now, it helped me understand why your pitch is so incredibly accurate. So now, I interrupted you. Let's go back to the program.
Oh, sure.
After, we were in the middle, and what comes after? So let's talk about
after in the middle. Looking down at my notes so I know what's next.
I think it's Abide.
It is Abide. And so in the middle, it ends about the franticness of our time, and the balance, the antidote that is to absolutely revel in these beautiful moments that surround us daily, that we're unaware of, and to remember to embrace them and enjoy them. I did bring a copy of the music.
So we're kind of hoping that the concert will be that experience for some people in the audience.
Hopefully, that would be the goal.
Right.
Hopefully that happens. These terrific lines in the poetry. Forgive me if I forget with the bird's song and the day's last glow folding into the hands of the trees. Forgive me the few syllables of the autumn crickets, the year's last firefly winking like a penny in the shoulder's weeds. These beautiful things that surround us daily. I just love this last line. Forgive if I startle when you put your hand in mine, if they were so taken by some other piece of beauty that they've forgotten. If I wonder how long your light has taken to reach me here. I think that's one of the things that drew the students at Rocky to the piece, was that last line. They loved that.
Yeah, and the shoulders weeds is a really interesting idea. I would think we're talking about the shoulder of a road.
I would guess also, because you're growing along at breakneck speed and go, what was that?
That's right, yeah. And have that experience often in Montana in springtime.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the chords are lush and beautiful. It slows down. It's a 9-minute piece, so the chords unfold slowly, the imagery unfolds slowly, so it's the antidote to the franticness of the time aspect of the previous piece.
Yeah, at least the last little segment of it.
Yeah, last segment.
Yeah. And so what else have we got on the program?
After that, we sing One Voice, which is one of the Rocky students' father's favorite piece.
Oh, really? In the original version from the Wailing Jennings?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, another female composer, another bringing the pop genre into the classic idiom, another balancing act of how do we balance pop music with art music.
Yeah.
So we'll bring it into the concert hall. Why not? Why not bridge that gap? Why not balance those things?
Well, and what's one of the things that's fascinating about that is how she, in the Waylon Jennings version, bends the notes. And getting a choir to do that's quite a different thing.
It is a very soloistic, and it's kind of anathema to choirs.
Right. Because you can't get 100 people to bend at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. But it's a fascinating arrangement and absolutely beautiful. And you've picked some incredible soloists to
It's really fun to have that color palette to play with. You know, some superb voices in the choir.
There are indeed. So that's and
superb human beings that bring something different to the table as they sing it. So the personality of the person behind that is also embedded in the decision making.
Right. And it's easy to lose sight of that when we're all up there dressed the same way and singing the same music.
Yeah. This is the sound of one voice. The sound of one who made a choice. This is the sound of one voice. So there's a great recording of it, one of the military ensembles doing it. I think it's I listened to both of them, the Army and the Navy band and choir. And when you see a female dressed in their dress blues saying, this is the sound of one voice, one person who made a choice, yes, she did. And then when they do a duet, the sound of voices too, the sound of me singing with you. It's very powerful. Nobody gets left behind. It's terrific stuff. The divisiveness of our time in which we live, the ending is, this is the sound of all of us.
And it almost goes back to not quite, but it's closer to the solo line than it is to the harmony lines.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we end with the full choir singing, this is the sound of one voice.
In unison.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that what divides us doesn't matter. What the things that divide us tend to be petty, and the things that are really important are truly what unite us.
So we've got 2 minutes to talk about 2 more pieces.
Okay. Rosephanie Powell, her setting of Non Nobis Domine is just a motor device that's just a blast. It's really fun, energetic, and just it's a great ride to the end. And I've really enjoyed her music for some. We sang one in the High Plains group that you were also involved in a long time ago. I've enjoyed her music greatly over the years.
I mean, the piece almost sounds Renaissance. In a way, it goes back to the language and so it's it's an interesting contrast in there.
Yeah, sung in Latin. And then the last piece is just full bore Americana, rear back and let it fly. It's a great, tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, tell me of an unclouded day. I messed up that last line. Tell me a home where no storm.
Well, it goes back and forth. Clouded day and
Oh,
unclouded
they
day.
tell me of an unclouded day.
Yeah.
And it's a great big old chord stack. It kind of mirrors the first piece that we did. It's a thick 8-part setting, and
except everybody's singing slightly different things in there.
Yep, yeah. So it's a little tricky. It's fun. It's energetic. My favorite chord is in the city that was made of gold, and it just sounds shiny and
it does
fun.
Because there's a lot of dissonance in there, and it's just doing wonderful things.
It's joyful, exuberant. So the whole concert then ends joyfully. I thought, if there's anything that the pandemic also taught us, is that we need the joyfulness and exuberance of hope.
Yes, yes, and that song has a lot of it. I think we've used our time. Is there anything else you want to add about this concert?
I hope the singers enjoy the ride, and I hope that the audience does too.
Thank you. Wonderful talking to you. Thank you, Steve.
Likewise, Tom. Thanks.